Hello, and welcome to the Steve and Mark Discuss podcast, where Steve looks through the media, picks out something interesting, we discuss it for up to 20 minutes or so. Okay, so over to Steve.
Hi, people. I forgot to do the hi, people in the last podcast, but never mind. This is a little story about two countries that probably nobody's ever heard of before. On the southern border of Russia, one country is called Armenia, and the other country is called Azerbaijan. Now, these countries have been squabbling amongst themselves about a region of between them both called Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, Nagorno-Karabakh used to be part of Azerbaijan, but they broke away to become independent, they prefer to become part of Armenia, because the majority of the population in Nagorno-Karabakh are Armenian. So recently, Azerbaijan invaded this Nagorno-Karabakh in a military, I'm trying to think of the word, action, for want of a better word. They called it counter-terrorism. And basically to try and take over this region, saying it's part of Azerbaijan. Armenia got in contact with the US because I don't know if you realize that the story is very similar to that of Ukraine and Russia, where the Donbass region of Ukraine, the people there wanted to leave Ukraine and become independent, and Ukraine in the east, in the west of Ukraine, were bombarding the Donbass region since 2014, and the Russians came in. Well, so Armenia got in contact with the United States saying, help us. We're being invaded by some naughty people. And Blinken of the US sent them a message saying, stop shooting each other and get round the negotiating table. Which for me was a stark contrast to what they're doing with Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
Probably because these two countries are smaller than Ukraine and Russia, and perhaps because they're not all that important. However, for the Americans.
Yeah.
And so, what I would suggest is that perhaps the what the Americans are trying to show to the world of how to behave, it's good for some, but not so much for the others. One little interesting thing that came out of this little story here. Well, first of all, is that Russia got them around the table, and they've got sort of a ceasefire going on. But the leader of Azerbaijan 2 days ago had a meeting with the British president of an oil company. So that makes me think perhaps in Azerbaijan there might be oil. Yeah, because you wouldn't have a meeting with a British oil company if it just to have a cup of tea and biscuits. There's got to be a reason behind it. Yeah. If there is oil in Azerbaijan, I'm sure that the United States would try and take the moral high ground and say, let's help Armenia, and let's help get these oil fields, because for sure, if Europe or the US can get control of these oil fields, then a lot of the problems of high fuel costs going into Europe could be solved,
Right.
because Azerbaijan is not Russia, so there are no sanctions,
Mm.
and I'm sure that Russia was very, very pally with Armenia until Armenia wanted to join the EU
Mm.
and also NATO, and then they got cold feet. Russians did, and started to look a lot closer to Azerbaijan,
Mm.
and which is I think is why the Russians they did this peace deal. Is the cheapest and simplest, and as the two countries are relatively small
Yeah.
and it's significant in the world,
Yeah.
it's the best way to handle it. Pity they can't do it with the Ukraine Russia conflict, but
Yeah.
there you go. Over to you.
Well, okay. It's a big international game of risk. In real life. That's just what I was thinking. Sorry, when you were talking. Yeah. Yeah.
Moving the pieces.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think the US can really afford to get involved in any more territorial disputes in Eastern Europe, let alone anywhere else in the world at the moment, given the mood across the American people. I mean, yeah, having seen Rand Paul stand up in Congress yesterday and say his piece, which would have resonated with me as an American if I was an American. Yeah, I'm a British person. Um, yeah, I think the US have got to be careful of their own population. Um, the Russians do not want another conflict on their doorstep, be it involving them or not, because invariably they're going to be dragged into it. Um, Quite why? Well, yeah, a chairman of a British oil concern goes and meets them. That's happening all the time, anywhere in the world. Yeah, there's things happening in our region with,
Surely only where there's oil involved.
yeah. Well, of course, yeah. I mean, despite the virtual signalling, and I'm going to call it that, it's going around the world. We can't turn away from oil just yet, if at all ever. Um, yeah. What are solar panels made of ultimately? What are mobile phones made of ultimately? What are my glasses made for ultimately? Yeah, let's be realistic about it. Even the glass in my glasses needs oil in the process. So, yeah, whatever you do, I'm afraid that it is what it is. Yeah, I've got a plastic cup in front of me, and I've got a computer made of oil, basically, or plastic comes from oil. So, yeah, whatever way you look at it, um, the fuel is only the small part of it. But it's good they're talking. It's good, that everybody's saying, the Russians and the Americans are saying to countries, yeah, sit down and talk. We can't do it. We can't do any more of this. You're too small to actually us to worry about. Yeah, if you want to have a bit of a local dust up, one of us will go in and sort it all out for you if you want it. That's probably the threat, basically. And yeah, the fact that the British are involved in it means, British stamping it, publicly stamping, we've got an interest in this country, we'll defend it. Falkland Islands alike, we'll put a
We
base.
don't know. We don't know if the UK has got an interest in it. We just know. I
Yeah,
just know that the two people met.
well,
I don't know what any decisions were made from that meeting.
I don't know how the British government operate and allowing talking even between potentially troubled areas would be. I'd imagine somebody in the British government would have known that there's been a law executive going to meet someone in their own territory. It's not like it happened in a hotel lobby in London that somebody just happened to be there from Azerbaijan. Um, so it's rather interesting. Yeah, it's interesting what you say, the relationship between Russia and Armenia. Armenia have probably made some things about the EU. When we're talking about the EU, there's all this thing about that there could be a four tier EU, which Starmer's been chasing around this week, talking about with the EU and others. To me, he's yeah, yeah. I'm not going to go down on this podcast
It'll
what
be
I
more
think.
like the Union than the Union.
Well, I mean, there's arguments is there probably is a good argument for it in some way. If it stayed as an economic union, great, and I think any of us would be quite comfortable with that. Something that made business easy. It's what the EU is becoming, or has become, or mission creep is a term I heard used to describe it yesterday. It became mission creep. This is what it started off as.
That's right.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's
It grew,
become
it grew and grew and grew
yeah.
and grew and grew and grew and
Um,
grew.
Various different people may have had good intentions. Unfortunately, you have to look at outcomes sometimes. If I do this, and I've done project management, if we do this, what was the outcome of it? Yeah, you optioneer. We call it optioneering. Yeah,
Well, I think in the case of the EU, is that they need the money, they're in debt,
yeah,
and they have to do something because anybody going on the outer tier is going to have to contribute something to the EU.
yeah,
They're doing these tiers, and it's a little, you have to contribute to the centre,
mm,
which is the part that is in debt, basically,
yeah.
is in debt.
Well, I mean, I heard of a four-tier EU about 10 years ago, 15 years
Mm,
ago. The
mm.
proposal was kicking around then. Um, okay, maybe maybe to allow smaller countries in to help. Well, help
To
them
pay,
to
to
well
pay.
to help them, yeah, to pay. So they pay for consultancy. I don't know. Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm all for people cooperating and working together. That doesn't mean I might have my views about different things, but I still believe people should be have the scope to cooperate, and as you say, talk to each other. What's best for us? How do we move forward? That makes good well business sense and good international cooperational sense for me.
Just on a side note,
Yeah.
um, Poland has, you
Mm.
know, that Poland has refused to
Yeah.
import grain from Ukraine because it would damage the internal market for its own farmers.
Yeah.
Because if there's a flood of Ukrainian grain that went into
No.
Poland,
Well,
then the price of the grain would go down,
yeah.
and
Well.
so Poland said it's not
Mm.
going to buy the grain from Ukraine,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
and so the Ukraine has been bad mouthing Poland.
Well.
So Poland,
Yeah.
so,
I know
so
you.
Poland, this is what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
Poland has said no more arms for you. So Poland are not going to give any more arms to Ukraine for
Okay.
their battle,
Okay.
and we don't know yet. We don't know yet because this only came out yesterday.
Mm.
We don't know if Poland is going to prohibit the Americans to use Poland to send arms to
Yeah.
Ukraine
Well.
because it used to go from the US to Poland,
Yeah.
Poland into Ukraine.
Well. I mean, the Polish have always been a bit sharper in the region, a bit shrewder and a bit sharper. I mean, don't forget they did suffer under Western and all sorts of things. I mean, the Polish are resilient people, and
Yeah,
they'll play their
they all are in that region.
yeah
They all are.
they'll play it every which way the Polish are until it ceases to be a benefit. I mean, they're clever people. I mean, yeah, I would tell you this, and I've seen it. Never try and do business with a Polish person because you, you will lose some fingers in the process.
I'll tell you,
They're
trying
good.
to trying to do trying to do business with people a little close to home.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying the UK. I'm just saying where we are.
yeah,
You know, you lose your arm. You lose your arm.
yeah. I mean, oh yeah, yeah. It's I'm not saying everything bad, but yeah, you got to be canny. You got to be canny. Yeah, it's it's a
I've,
rather interesting experience. But that I mean, of course, we come from the UK where everyone is decent and honest and above board, so we're not used to this type of skullduggery. Yes.